Om Tavakatam Ritam Tapta Jivanam Kavipiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatatam Bhuvinranantiye Burida Janaha. The nectar of your words, the praise of poets seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears. Cleanser of all sins is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Om peace, peace, peace. Good evening, friends. We will be continuing our study on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are still on page 177 for those that are following along. The past few times that we met, Sri Ramakrishna has been speaking with Pran Krishna. Pran Krishna wanted to follow the path of non-dualistic Vedanta, and he is trying to, in various ways, convince him that the path of bhakti can also lead to the formless God, formless reality. And he was also trying to convince Pran Krishna that it is one thing to read and study the Vedanta, and another thing to assimilate and make those teachings practical. So he also discussed God's powers, that one must be able to renounce worldliness to be able to experience God, and also how to love God and to practice the discipline of truthfulness. Now, as Sri Ramakrishna was speaking on these topics, being that these are spiritual topics, he was gradually going into an ecstatic state. And so we are now going to read from that point onward. So Sri Ramakrishna was sitting on the small couch. He was in an ecstatic mood and looked at Rakal. Suddenly he was filled with a tender feeling of parental love toward his young disciple and spiritual child. Presently he went into samadhi. The devotee sat speechless, looking at the master with wondering eyes. So Sri Ramakrishna, he experienced different attitudes and different spiritual moods at various times of the day. And depending on where he was, what the situation was, he would just, in this case, in discussion, talking about God, that kind of like elevated his mind, and he felt that that urge to go into that spiritual mood, and he was losing consciousness of his surroundings. So in the room with him was Pran Krishna, of course, but also M and Rakal were there. Now, as his attention now turned to Rakal, and remembering his relationship with Rakal, he regarded Rakal as his spiritual son. And Rakal is also the future Swami Brahmananda. Rakal at this point is 20 years old. But this idea of a spiritual child, so how that came about was that although Sri Ramakrishna was married to Sarda Devi, that marriage was never consummated. And they agreed that their marriage would be a spiritual marriage. And as such, Sri Ramakrishna looked on Sarda Devi as the divine mother of the universe and worshipped her as such. On the other side, Sarda Devi looked on Sri Ramakrishna also as the divine mother. So neither one could even the concept of conception was not possible between the two of them. But in an ecstatic state, Sri Ramakrishna had a vision. And in that vision, the Divine Mother he prayed to the Divine Mother for a sincere lover of God, a boy who could stay with him. And when Ramakrishna is with children or with a young person, he starts to behave like a young person. He himself was approaching 50 years old. But he considered himself a child of God. But in this vision, Divine Mother showed him a young boy coming to him. Now he was with Hridoy at this point, and he told Hridoy about this vision, and Hridoy was overwhelmed and with joy. He said, "Oh, you and Sarada Devi are going to have a child." And that's how he interpreted that vision. And Ramakrishna exclaimed that that wasn't possible because he looked upon all women as mother. So how is that? So he was surprised. So how could he have a son? Well, he had a second vision, and in that vision, the Divine Mother put a child on his lap. And again, Ramakrishna was wondering, what is this about? But the Divine Mother reassured him and said, "This is your spiritual son." And after that vision, sorry. After this vision, Rakhal came a few days later, and he recognized Rakhal from his first vision. And so from that point onward, he had a motherly affection toward Rakhal, and Rakhal, in turn, felt that he was like the child of Ramakrishna. At that point, Rakhal was 18 years old, but he was very innocent, very guileless, and Ramakrishna wanted to protect him as a mother would protect a child. So he would also discipline him and raise him as a child because he was kind of innocent of the way the world worked. So Sri Ramakrishna would discipline him and teach him as a parent would teach a child. And in turn, Rakhal felt very free with him. In fact, more free than the other brother disciples would feel. He would sit on Thakur's lap and kind of be around him, and very, very affectionate relationship. But he would also be scolded at times, just as a parent might scold a child. So each one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples had a different kind of relationship with him. And in this case, Rakhal had this relationship. And because Sri Ramakrishna's mind was naturally inclined to have spiritual experiences and to tend towards samadhi, the presence of Rakhal and having to take care of him and be responsible for him brought his mind down to the worldly plane so that he could actually teach and talk about God with other devotees. So from that point of view, Rakhal is Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual child. So he was in an ecstatic mood and looked on Rakhal, and suddenly he was filled with a tender feeling of parental love toward his young disciple and spiritual child. Presently he went into samadhi. The devotee sat speechless, looking at the master with wondering eyes. So as Ramakrishna is going towards samadhi, he is not experiencing the formless aspect of God because he is working between two different planes, between this plane and then this plane. And in that plane, he's either talking about God or he's experiencing God as the Divine Mother. So he is now identifying himself with the Divine Mother and has gone into samadhi. Regaining partial consciousness, the Master said, "Why is my spiritual feeling kindled at the sight of Rakal?" And I had just explained earlier what is happening. He is feeling that when he was talking about God, his mind was on the worldly plane. When he looks at Rakal, then he's reminded about the Divine Mother, because that's how he looks upon himself in relation to Rakal, on the worldly plane. But now he says, the more you advance toward God, the less you will see of his glories and grandeur. So on one hand, Sri Ramakrishna looked on himself as the child of God, but when he's in the presence of Rakal, he felt that he was the mother of this pure-souled Rakal, and would actually worship God as this divine child. So he's saying the aspirant at first has a vision of the goddess with 10 arms. There is a great display of power in that image. The next vision is that of the deity with 2 arms, where there are no longer 10 arms holding various weapons and missiles. Then the aspirant has the vision of Gopala, in which there is no trace of power. It is the form of a tender child. So here he is with this motherly aspect, trying to, in a way, raise this divine child, looking on Rakal as Gopala, because he has mentioned that Rakal was one of Krishna's playmates. And so he looked on Rakal as the baby Gopala and would treat him and raise him up as if he was this child. So, and at the worldly state of mind, he was the mother of this child. Now, there are many attitudes that one can take to worship God, and he himself has practiced many different looking at God with many different aspects, from many different aspects. And here he is, basically, if you study Rakal's life, Swami Brahmananda's life, you'll see many instances of how Sri Ramakrishna basically raised this child, how he disciplined him, how he taught him, and so forth. And in a sense, it also sets an example of how to raise a child in the world while still maintaining a spiritual attitude. So it is well worth to study more on Rakal's life, because it'll give some practical insight into how this relationship could work. And remember, he's also talking to Pran Krishna, trying to show him how, through various forms of bhakti, one can actually experience the formless aspect of God. Because he says that when an aspirant has this vision of Gopala and there is no trace of power, it is the form of a tender child. Beyond that, there are other visions also. The aspirant then sees only light, that formless aspect of God. So he's been talking about worshiping God when God shows all his powers. So we have Mother Durga, for example, 10 arms, every arm has weapons on it, and you wonder, wow, that's very imposing. How can that, is there any tender aspect to that? But Sri Ramakrishna is saying, well, the closer you get to loving God in whatever image you feel attracted to, that love deepens to the point where you see less of its powers and you feel love from that image, to the point where a tender relationship forms between God and that image. And I was thinking, well, imagine that your mother is the President of the United States, and you're just one of her young child. Well, her many arms will be like the many arms of the government that can either raise you or can either make you or ruin your life. She has that kind of power. But when she goes home to her child or to the White House and her baby, that baby knows nothing about her powers. That's just her mommy. And so that's the kind of relationship you develop with God. You're just God's little child. You don't have a clue anymore. You don't pay attention to all those powers. So, but yet she has those powers to make or break lives. So, yes, you start out with the image, but as that devotion matures, you become that little child, and you see only God as your mother. So now he continues. Reasoning and discrimination vanish after the attainment of God and communion with Him in samadhi. How long does a man reason and discriminate? As long as he is conscious of the manifold, as long as he is aware of the universe, of embodied beings, of I and you, he becomes silent when he is truly aware of unity. This was the case with Trilanga Swami. Trilanga Swami was a Swami or a monk that Sri Ramakrishna had met in Benares, who practiced the vow of silence. But Sri Ramakrishna understood that he was an illumined soul who experienced God and was silent not because of the vow as much as his experience was so sublime that it could not be put into words. So when reason and discrimination vanish after the attainment of God and communion with Him in samadhi, well, all the individual items in the world have disappeared, have merged into that sense of unity. Your ego has dissolved into that sense of unity. There's nothing else left that can separate you from that unity. What are you going to talk about? When Sri Ramakrishna comes down from samadhi, when he talks about his experiences, they're only like, he's only trying to explain something in a manner that you could understand, but that will never satisfy the reality of clarifying the reality. They are only hints. And the real experience is only when you've gone through the whole process. Unless you've gone through the whole process, you will never really understand what God really is, no matter how well it can be described. That's why they say God is beyond words, beyond speech. So in that experience, you can't really say anything. And even to say something almost feels like you're now put limitations on God, and you feel ashamed to do that. So you would rather say nothing. So now he gives an example. He says, have you ever watched a feast given to the Brahmins? So it's common for some wealthy people to have a big feast where they invite all the priests and all the monks and so forth, well, not priests, but the monks, and have a big bandara, a big feast. And then they will offer gifts and everything in the hope that they will gain some grace from God. Because it's typical that when you invite monks and feed them, they will give their blessings to whomever has provided the food and the offerings. So he's saying, have you ever watched a feast given to the Brahmins? At first there's a great uproar, because they've all sat down, they're now meeting all in one place. They start discussing their experiences, wandering around. It'll all be like semi-worldly talk, the kind of talk that monks might have. and then the food will be served. So, but the noise lessens as their stomachs become more and more filled with food. When the last course of curd and sweets is served, one hears only the sound of soup soup as they scoop up the curd in their hands. There is no other sound. And next is the stage of sleep, where they take a nap. And he's equating that to samadhi, when one has, first you've talked a lot about God, you've experienced God and all this, but then as you get close to God, everything becomes quiet. And in that state, you are now in samadhi. You no longer differentiate between all the different things in the world. Your spiritual experiences have all culminated into that one experience of samadhi. At that point, your mind is quiet. You are no longer experiencing differentiations. All you see is experiences with unity. You are in a state of samadhi. So Sri Ramakrishna is trying to describe to Pran Krishna that following the path of bhakti, or devotion to God, through the worship of a divine image, one can experience the formless aspect of God and will experience that God in the state of samadhi, where all is silent, where the individual objects are gone, the ego is gone, and only the formless reality remains. So, when in that state also, in the case of someone like Sri Ramakrishna, being a divine incarnation, he can come back from that stage of samadhi and is able to teach, to talk about God. But he needs help to come back in that sense, in the sense that he needs some kind of worldly attachment that can bring him back. Sometimes he would say, and be in that kind of like semi-state, you say, I want water. Well, water is something that's available in this worldly plane, and that brings him back. Sometimes people, his devotees would actually bring him some water, and he would take it. Other times he could not accept it, because his body, he would not really be in a state of, he would not have enough consciousness where he could swallow a glass of water. It would take him more time to get to that level where he could actually consume water. But he also has the situation where now he's taking care of a child. But in a sense, he's taking care of all devotees. He's trying to talk about God or teach about God. But when we as spiritual aspirants, if we ever get to that stage of samadhi, we would not be coming back the way a divine incarnation comes back. We have put all our energy and our spiritual practice into reaching the goal, but we would have expended so much, all of our energy into that we do not have the energy to come back as a divine incarnation would have. So in a sense, we would give up the body when it can no longer be sustained. And the scriptures say that the human body in a state of samadhi would not live past 21 days. But in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, it seems that when he was having these experiences during his states of spiritual practice, there was always someone there that understood his spiritual state and would take care of the body. We unlikely would have all that available, and it would be up to God to decide whether we come or whether we go. So that's why you just take refuge in God and let him decide. So Sri Ramakrishna did take refuge in the Divine Mother, and the Divine Mother said, you come back and you teach. But stay in that state of where you are between the the fifth and sixth stage of mental awareness, where if your energy is at the throat level, you can speak and talk about God, but your mind will be fluctuating between having visions and experiencing God as a Divine Mother, or at the worldly plane where you can actually instruct or talk about God. But Sri Ramakrishna never felt that it was he speaking about God. He always felt, no, it was the Divine Mother speaking. He was just the instrument. So I will actually leave it at that point. The next time we meet won't be until March 5th. We will be having a winter break for almost 2 months. We will be open one day to celebrate Swami Vivekananda's birthday toward the end of January. And if you go to our website, that date is there, but you will receive a weekly reminder. And we will reopen to celebrate Shivaratri and Shamakrishna's birthday, and that's at the end of February. And all those available days, including Christmas and Kalpataru Day that are coming up, are all on a Wednesday. So there is no gospel class for the rest of this month. You'll be singing Christmas carols or sitting in the shrine practicing your meditation on Kalpataru Day. So, some other announcements. There will be a class given by Swami Brahmatmananda. That will be tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. And he will be continuing the book Towards the Goal Supreme. On Friday, Swami Satyamananda will be continuing the class on Mantra Yoga. He'll be speaking on the 80-20 rule in japa and meditation. That will be class number 10. And then this Sunday at 10 a.m., we will have a Karma Yoga Day here in Seattle. That day, because we have Holy Mother's Puja the next day, I'm hoping we have enough people that we can set up for, I would say, the whole puja season and through. So they'll be decorating and arranging chairs, carpets, and whatever, cleaning up everything so that we can accept people the next day. So that will be on this coming Saturday from 10 a.m. onward. Sunday at 11 a.m., Swami Satyamananda will be conducting Sri Sarda Devi's Puja, and you're all invited. That will also be streamed live. Those who are watching us on stream will not be able to partake of the prasad that will be offered afterwards. So if you want any prasad, show up in person. That's on the 22nd. 2 days after that, we'll be celebrating the Christ Puja and Christmas Eve. We will also be singing Christmas carols. So Raka will probably be helping us on the piano, but also we may also have other piano players. So you're all welcome to attend that and sing your heart out. Just a reminder also, we are collecting clothes for foster children, our Sunday school children. That is their project for this year, and they will be collecting clothes through to January 1st. There is one question online. The question is it very uncommon to experience samadhi for sadhakas? One thing that we have to keep in mind is that even among the monks of the Ramakrishna order, if anyone has attained samadhi or realized God, they don't talk about it. They keep it hidden. And the only way you would know is how they conduct their daily lives. And so, because in a way, just as in the case of Ramakrishna, he had protectors that they kind of understood his state of mind, and they kind of protected him as if he was very delicate, a child. And so you'll find that God, in one way or the other, protects monks or spiritual aspirants that have had experience to God. So whether it's uncommon, it's hard to say. But you would know by their lives. So that's really all I can say on that. If there are any other questions in the room, that was the question online. So if not, I will just conclude with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Ritavigraham Vayem Ishavataram Paramesamnityam Tvam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna, who is without blemish, eternal and infinite in forms, who has assumed human form out of compassion for the devotees, who is God incarnate, the Supreme Lord, and who is most worshipful. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.